Welcome to Success Weekly with James Tharris, a weekly dose of thought-provoking ideas and helpful tips on improving your mindset. And now, here's your host, James Tharris.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Success Weekly. I'm your host, James Tharris, and wow, it is today is September 19th, 2017, and got a lot of exciting things going on personally right now. We just came out of a hurricane and really got out of that largely unscathed. The only damage that we really had to deal with was a couple of screens on our back porch that we have to replace, and we're talking, less than $500. Still no fun shelling out $500 when you don't have to, but my goodness, the alternative might have been a lot worse. So very thankful for that, and thankful for all of the prayers that friends and family sent down. We've got the school has been booming this last couple of weeks, and in fact, the hurricane actually led to additional people coming to check the school out, and we had probably our best evening to date last Thursday when people were coming in as a result of some of them being out of power and looking for a place to kind of escape the seriousness of life and come and enjoy classes with us, and it was a rocking evening. So really loved that. And also I've been working on another book. In fact, I've been working on two other books. One of the books, though, the manuscript has been written, and I'm just not happy with how it turned out, and it needs to be reworked a little bit, and some additional things added, maybe some things taken out. And I'm really, to be honest with you, not motivated to work on that one just yet. And that's a book on leadership, and I thought when I first started writing it that it was going to be pretty easy. And it was pretty easy. I actually just let my fingers do the walking, and I was typing, and ideas were coming to me and whatnot. And I finished the book in a fairly short period of time. But when I went back and printed it out and started to read it and do some editing, I realized that, wow, there's a lot of things that need to be updated in this thing, and they need to be fixed with just the overall formatting of it. And I had a few people read it and give me their opinion on it, and I even I paid somebody to do some editing to it and things, and it just wasn't the great book that I thought it was going to be. So that one's still in the works, and I will get back to that sometime and finish it, and it will be a great book, I believe. But anyway, I'm currently writing a book. In fact, it's my wife and I are writing the book. I'm doing the writing and creative end of it, but I've been taking a chapter home every night and reading it to her before bed just to get her thoughts on it. And she's then helping me, direct with, maybe this character does this and that character does this, or maybe you should say it like this, or maybe that should be the end of the chapter and this should be the beginning of the chapter. And that's really been very valuable to me. So I'm writing the book, and the book's going to be called, this is a working title, but I believe it is going to be the final title. So because I had a first title in mind, and it was just going to be called Quest for the Black Sash, and that was kind of it. And then as I started writing the story just, it kind of formed on its own, and she was telling me, my wife was telling me, why don't you write down the chapters and what's going to happen, which I did a very loose version of that when I first came up with the idea to write this book. It's going to be a children's book, by the way, not anything like I've written before or published before. Written before, yes, but not published before. And I've gotten it finished, and I'm going back and doing a second rewrite and re-edit right now. But I'm very excited about the book because as I was writing it, I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know who the characters were going to be and what they were going to be doing. And that's part of the joy of writing and creatively for me, is I get to kind of be a witness to this story firsthand, and at the same time I get to direct it a little bit and help to mold the story where I need to. But for the most part, I'm just sitting here typing away, and one word leads to the next and leads to the next, and as a character has an interaction with one of the other characters, I sit back and go, now what would he say, and what voice would he have, and what would her voice be, and what would she be saying, and how would she respond to this? And so it's been a really fantastic and fun experience for me. And as I said, I've been reading the chapters to the missus in the evening. And when I read the first chapter, I had talked to her about writing this book probably a week or two before I actually sat down and started on it. And she said, "Oh, that'd be great. We could do this, that, and the other." And I gave her the outline of what it might be, and then I wrote the first chapter, and I brought it home one night, and I unfolded the papers, and I said, "Let me read you something." And she said, "Okay." And as I started to read it, at first she knew what it was, and she had thought that it was maybe I was reading somebody else's book or something, and she really kind of got into it. And so when I ended the first chapter, she was like, "Wow, that's great. Who wrote that? You didn't write that." And I said, "Well, actually, yeah, I did write that." And she was, pretty impressed with it. And I thought, really? I didn't think it was that great. I thought it was, kind of nice, but not that great. And she's like, "Oh my goodness, you have no idea." And okay, so that gave me motivation to want to get to the next chapter. And then I got kind of addicted, I guess, to reading these chapters. And so for the past 2 weeks, pretty much each evening, Monday through Friday, I've been doing a chapter, and then the last couple of chapters I did it in half chapters, and so I could stretch it out a little bit and massage the ending and things. So that's what I'm most excited about right now. I should be able to finish up on it fairly soon. I don't want to give myself an actual deadline because I'm still not sure of the age group that I want to write to, or I want this to be to. And I guess to a large degree that's already been determined. But I think it'll be a great book for parents to read to their kids. I'm not planning to have a lot of illustrations in it, but you never know. Depends on what it would cost me to get somebody to do these illustrations, and if they would be willing to do them for within my budget, which at the moment isn't a whole lot. But well, I don't know. Okay, so it's about 50 pages right now, and I've got a great concept for the front cover of it, and the title, of the working title, which I believe is going to be the title, is going to be Tom Goo, The Quest of the Four Friends. And I won't give you any more about that until I actually finish the story, and I might talk about that in one of my podcasts a little bit as well. I think it'll be interesting to hear. But I'm going to get this book published, and I'm going to release it to the entire martial arts industry, and hopefully some of them find it valuable that they decide to purchase some copies for their students to learn to enjoy as well. So my thought on this book is that I'm going to write in a series of these books. I don't know if it's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We'll see. It might be that I never write another one of these. I don't know. So I'm kind of leaving all of that open, kind of like I did in the story. I didn't try to direct the story too much. I knew there were several things that I wanted to include in the story, but I didn't know how they were going to be pieced together and what the level of importance each one of them would play, and which characters would do these things and which characters would not do these things, and all of that. So it's really been a passion of mine and a joy, this particular project. I mean I guess I can't say that because I love writing. So I write for magazine articles as well, and I enjoy those just as much, even though they're much shorter. But to putting a book together, the last one that I really did, I wrote them pretty much simultaneously, was my Korean Kung Fu updated and expanded version, and the leadership book. I was writing them concurrently, so I would write one, I'd get very tired and let that one rest, and then I would start working on the other one. And it's kind of like doing Back to the Future parts 2 and 3. I don't know if you know this, but they filmed both of those movies simultaneously. And that's why at the end of 2 they had so many scenes that they'd show you from the third one that was coming up, because they'd already filmed the whole thing. And they say that the third one took a little bit of a hit, and that's why it wasn't as well received by audiences, because they weren't able to spend as much time on it. And then of course they had George McFly, who they couldn't get him to come back for the third one. Was he in the second one as well? I think he was, but they couldn't get it back to maybe it was the second one. They couldn't get him to come back to it. Yeah, I think it was the second one, because he wanted too much money, and So they had some guy that they dressed up to look like him, and they had him hanging upside down and like a wheelchair thing, and tried to make his voice sound like it. And we could all tell it wasn't him. I think it would have been even better had they paid the extra money and gotten Crispin Glover was the guy's name that played not Marty McFly, but George McFly, the father. And so anyway, I relate my Kung Fu book and my leadership book to that, because I think my leadership book suffered a little bit because I was trying to write that and then a how-to manual and historical book at the same time. And that's what happens when you multitask. So anyway, that's what I'm excited about right now. And wow, we're already 10 minutes into this podcast, and that's not where the direction I had in mind today. So I hope you enjoyed that little diversion. But today, my subject is near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I put together when I do these podcasts. I will be maybe driving down the street, and I'll come up with a great idea. It'll just pop into my head, and so as soon as I get to a stoplight, I'll pull my phone out and I'll write an email to myself, and it'll say podcast idea, comfortably uncomfortable, which is what the title of today's podcast is. And I've got a whole bunch of other ones as well on the back burner. And I've got a little book that I write in and come up with ideas and try to flesh out a little bit of again, like an outline. But see, I'm more of a spontaneous person. And trying to work from a script or trying to work from an outline sometimes works really well, and it sometimes helps my performance improve and gives me better results. But to be honest with you, many times, much of my very best work is off the cuff, on the fly, when I'm not trying to create something with details in mind. I'm more of a big picture person, and coming up with an idea and then giving that idea to the right people, and some people like my wife who are very detail oriented, and letting them string together some of the ideas and thoughts for me. But when it comes to my podcasts and of course my classes and things like that, I do plan them, but I leave room for what ifs. I leave room for what if I want to shift the content or the direction of this over a little bit. And I like to have that. For me, I'm a spontaneous person, and I don't like to know what's going on all the time. So my wife and I were having a conversation the other night about somebody's, I forget if it was a commercial or it was a meme or something on Facebook or whatever, about knowing the time of your own death, and how I thought, wow, that would be I wouldn't want to know that, But on the other side, if I knew that I had 20 more years to live, how much more would I live in those 20 years? So it's kind of a catch-22 there. And so, but still, I think if I had the choice, I don't know. I think out of curiosity, I might want to know, but I think I'd be better off not having the opportunity to know, so that I can chart my course and live my life and enjoy it without, worrying that it's coming to an end, right? So, which all of our lives are eventually. We don't know how much time we've got. So anyway, today's topic is comfortably uncomfortable. Now, this is a phrase that I have heard literally, and I mean this literally. I literally mean the term literal in the literal sense, which has kind of been, misused over the past 10 years or so. It's kind of like the word awesome. Nothing's really awesome. How many things that people talk about that are awesome are really awesome? I mean, looking at Niagara Falls with the sun in the background, and as the water is gushing down and hitting the main, I guess, lake or river, whatever it's hitting, and all this mist coming up, and you can feel the power of it. That's awesome. All right. Somebody, bringing home an A on a report card. That's not awesome. That's nice. It's excellent, but it's not awesome. And that's, I guess, in my industry, martial arts, it gets used a little bit, maybe too much. So I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, one of the phrases that every one of my mentors has said to me, I've had mentors in martial arts. I've had mentors just in regular life. I've had mentors in business. I've had mentors in relationships. I've had mentors in writing and public speaking, and all sorts of different mentors. Every single one of them, whether they are successful in a physical sense or they are successful in a business sense or whatnot, they've all said the same thing, and that is you have to learn, if you're going to be successful at this, and they were talking about their own thing. So for instance, my good friend Bill Superfoot Wallace, when I trained with him for 2 or 3 years through his seminar series and had him out to my school for seminars, and he stayed at my house, and I drove him around for about 2 years at these seminars in the Midwest. And he always said, James, if you're going to become flexible, because that was my ultimate goal, was to be able to drop into full splits and kicks vertically in the air. And I did get to that level when I was about 14 years old, but I damaged my hips in the process, which I'm now paying for. And so that was my goal again. When I experienced it the first time, I wanted to experience it again, and I've never been able to quite get back to that level. So I searched for the person that I figured that I could get that information from, one of my heroes that I used to plaster his pictures on my wall with the other posters of other Bruce Lee and things like that, and Chuck Norris and Jackie Chan. Well, he was up there as well, Bill Superfoot Wallace. And I used to watch him on the PKA circuit, which was on television on one of the sports channels. And I'd watch his fights, and then of course he starred in movies, almost always as the bad guy. And I loved his character, and more than that, I loved his kicking ability and his flexibility, and it just really blew my mind. And he was talking to me about gaining flexibility, and he says, James, if you're going to get flexible, you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. So unless you're willing to go through the pain, no gain, right? Unless you're willing to go through the comfort or the discomfort of sitting there with your legs spread apart to the point that there's actual physical discomfort, well, you're not going to get any more flexible. You've got to sit there and you've got to enjoy being uncomfortable, and you let your legs stay apart, and maybe you do that for 30 seconds, and then you come back and you relax, and you do it again for 30 seconds, you come back and relax. And typically he would do like a series of 10 of these exercises where you'd spread your feet out as wide as you can get them, spread your legs open as wide as you can get them, and create stress on your hips. And then you sit there and you lean back and take the pressure off your hips or off your low back and place it where it needs to be, which is in the hips. And you sit there and you just endure it. And then you come out of it and you do it again. You rest for 5 or 10 seconds, you do it again, and you do several reps of it. But when you get to the last set, you hold it for maybe 2 minutes. And it's excruciatingly painful, but what usually happens is that when your muscles get to the point where they're fatigued, well, then they relax. And so then it allows you to spread your legs even further and get those beautiful kicks. And so I've done that, and I've gained back a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, I'd love to have more. So that concept and what I just explained as far as gaining flexibility, because that's really how it's done, is you have to get uncomfortable and you've got to sit through it and endure it. It's the same thing with developing strength in your legs. If you're a martial artist and you want to develop good strength in your legs, one of the best ways to do it is through traditional martial arts training, and that is stance training, which is very prevalent in many of the northern styles of Kung Fu, where you will sit in, let's say, a riding horse stance, which is basically looks like you're sitting on a horse. You've got your feet double shoulder width apart, and your knees are pressed out over your feet, so it looks like a little bit of a square. And some systems call it a square horse stance. And you sit there as low as you can get so that it looks like you're sitting on a bench. Your butt and your knees are level, and you sit there with your back straight and your arms pulled back by your ribs, and you endure the pain. Now, if you want to see a great visual representation of that particular thing, the riding horse stance, and how they use it for training, discipline, and getting past the comfort levels and gaining strength in your legs, look at the movie Jackie Chan's Drunken Master, and I believe it's the original 1970s one where he's got his teacher, his name is Sam C, and Sam Seed or Sam C, and he's a gray-haired old man with a hat and a goatee of sort, or mustache and beard. And he that's what he does. He makes him sit in this riding horse stance, and then the comedy of the scene is like Jackie Chan thinking that his master's not watching, and he tries to pop up, and then his master's right there to pop him on the head and make him sit back down. And anyway, that's his master making him comfortable with being uncomfortable, which then creates strength not only in his legs, but also in his willpower and his discipline, all the mental things that you need in order to progress in other areas. And so that I have a student. I have a lot of students that have gone through this process with me, and the ones that end up being successful are the ones who trust me, and that includes their parents. If this is a child, sometimes it's an adult, and sometimes it's children. So if it's children, I need the support and understanding of their parents and grandparents to see what it is I'm doing. And oftentimes, what I found is that the grandparents are sometimes more receptive because things were different in their days. Back in many grandparents' days, that's when spankings were kind of the order of the day, and timeouts were kind of, just maybe coming into being, and a lot of the grandparents didn't like the concept of timeouts. They were old school, and so when their grandkids are being a little uncomfortable, they understand what's going on and how it is going to benefit them, whereas parents, maybe they don't understand quite as much because they're watching their child struggle with something that's making them uncomfortable. But I'll tell you, it's in those moments where that child is struggling, that child is uncomfortable, that they're going to grow the best and the fastest, and they're going to get the most out of whatever it is they're doing. So, I have several things in my program that are purposely placed in the program to elicit uncomfortableness from every student. And some students are very comfortable with 90% of what we do, but there's that 10% of things that really make them uncomfortable. And then other students are uncomfortable with one thing after another thing after another thing. And it's those students that are uncomfortable the most often throughout my program that when they get to black belt, they are the ones that come to tears when they talk about their experience in the program and how life-changing it was and how glad that they were that I didn't give up on them during that time and their parents didn't give up on them during that time. And then I have the other group of parents that from the moment their child comes home and it wasn't fun for the first time, and maybe I had a correction for them, or even I might even have called them out during class for something, a lot of times they start rethinking whether they want to keep their kids in the program because they don't want to see their kids struggle. They don't want to see their kids unhappy. They don't want to see their kids uncomfortable. And unfortunately, that doesn't help that child develop and grow. So there's an old story that I tell in my martial arts classes that applies here, and it's the story of the butterfly and the cocoon. So I don't know if you've heard of it, but I'm going to recount it for you here very briefly. So there's a caterpillar, and a caterpillar is what turns into a butterfly, and if you didn't know, now you do. But a caterpillar climbs up into a bush in a meadow somewhere, and he starts to form his chrysalis, or his cocoon around him, in preparation for hibernation through the winter when he's going to go through his metamorphosis. And so during that time, while he's in the chrysalis, the caterpillar then begins to slowly change in from the shape that he was in, this little inchworm thing that's crawling on the ground with all these legs. Well, all of that stuff kind of transforms, and I don't know how it's done, but I bet you there's some YouTube videos where they put a camera inside one and we can kind of watch it happen. I might even take a look at that because I think that'd be interesting. But nonetheless, what happens is the caterpillar has to push his way out when he transforms to the butterfly. He's got wings on his back now, and he's got, instead of having these 100 legs or 50 legs, whatever he's got, or even 20 legs, he's got maybe 6 legs or whatever it is that he's going to use. And he has to use the strength of his wings to push that chrysalis or that cocoon open, and he's got to use the strength of his legs to push that cocoon open, and that's how he breaks out of the cocoon. Now, that is what allows the butterfly to fly, is the ability that he went through, or the abilities he gained from stressing his wings and stressing his legs. In other words, being uncomfortable. And that's what creates the ability for him to fly and enjoy the next chapter of his life. Well, in this story, a well-meaning young boy sees a butterfly trying to emerge from the chrysalis, from the cocoon, and he notices that the butterfly is struggling, and so he decides, you know what, I want to do this butterfly a favor, and I'm going to help him out of there. So the little boy goes over, and he's well-meaning. He tears open the chrysalis and places the butterfly in his hand and gives it a gentle toss so that the butterfly can then fly. And instead of the butterfly being able to take flight and use his wings, he falls to the ground, and the little boy picks him up again and tries to toss him in the air to help give him some air under his wings, and the same thing, a flap or two, and then bang, the butterfly is down on the ground. And the little boy feels very terrible about himself, and he feels terrible for the butterfly because the butterfly is not flying, and he thought he was going to help him, and then the butterfly dies. All right. So the moral of the story is the little boy, he was well-meaning. He really had great intentions, kind of like a lot of parents and grandparents have for their kids. They have great intentions. They want their kids to have a life that's better than theirs. They don't want them to struggle. But unfortunately, without that struggle, the kids never develop the strength, both physically, emotionally, and mentally. So I guess that's all three things. They don't ever develop that kind of strength, and then when they grow up, they don't know how to function in the real world. And I can tell you that from personal experience, because I had things go on in my childhood that were counterproductive to my success. And in a lot of ways, it's amazing. I'll tell you, it's amazing to many of my friends. In fact, any of my friends who've gotten around and gotten to see where my upbringing was, where I grew up, and meet my family members and things, and they go, wow, it's a miracle. I don't know how you did what you did and how you achieved your level of success. And I always point back to the martial arts, and I say, well, that was the difference in me and anybody else in my family. That was the one variable that was different, was I had this little loving but stern Korean man that took me under his wing, and he expected more of me. And when I was down on myself, he wouldn't let me cry and wallow in my self-pity. He would force me to be uncomfortable and say, Theris, knock it off. Stop that. Be a man today, right? And that's not how a black belt behaves. And he would always remind me of those things. And that's what it was. And it was a struggle for me to even get to black belt, because I kind of had it easy in some ways growing up, and in other ways I had it very difficult. But in some ways I had a lot of things provided for me that I didn't have to work for and earn, and I got some things that other kids didn't get, because my parents at that time, when I was very young, this was, by the way, we got some nice things because of that. But there were a lot of other things we didn't get, and therefore we had to struggle. And so when I got into the martial arts, I didn't understand the whole concept of struggling like I do now. And it took me a long time. It took me 9 years to achieve what others achieved in 2 to 3 years in the same school. Part of that was because I moved around a lot between my father and mother. They got divorced when I was 5 years old, and my father moved. He had his own apartment in Indianapolis for a while, but then he moved up to Minnesota. And so I was kind of going back and forth between my father's house up in Minnesota. I'd spend a couple of years with him and a couple of years back with my mother in Indianapolis, and I'd go back and forth for a variety of reasons. So therefore, I had to continually change martial arts schools, and I was always getting up to about the intermediate level, and then bang, I'd have to move again, and I'd have to kind of start over again. And I say kind of because each of the masters started to see that I had at least some intermediate skill, and they would allow me to begin in their program at an equivalent belt, and then I would work my way up a little bit. And it was just kind of one belt at a time. I'd go here, and then one belt I'd go there, and whatnot. But then I moved back to Indianapolis permanently, and I dug my heels in, and that's when I got serious. And the moment I got serious, I realized that if I was going to be as good as some of these other guys that now I was one of Master Che's first students, but when I left, a lot of other students came in and quickly replaced me as the senior students in that school. After my second year in that school, I had to move. That's when I moved up to Minnesota for my second time. And, then other people came in that were much more talented. When I came back, these guys were unbelievable. I mean, I had never seen, I had no, how in the heck did they get so good? And it's because of the stress that Master Che put on them, and the uncomfortableness and the expectations he had of them. And so I thought, wow, I didn't quite get what those guys got. I got a little bit of an easier version of what they got as far as the training. But don't get me wrong, the training was very rigorous and very demanding. But these guys, they stayed after classes sometimes 2 or 3 hours and became part of his competition team. And he trained the snot out of these guys. And I could see it. And they would get around me and they would say kind of bad things about it. And oh man, he worked us like dogs. I can't wait to get out of here. I don't want to see him for the next couple of days. Man, I need to get away. And I'm thinking, man, I would kill for what you got there. And I can't believe you're saying that to me. And I realized that, wow, in order for me to be as good as these guys, I'm going to have to go through what they did. And I'm going to have to be uncomfortable. And so I got used to being uncomfortable. And that's how I went from brown belt all the way up to black belt. And at that point, I realized, the quality of my abilities was way less than these other guys. And I felt really guilty. I almost thought like, wow, did he give me the belt or did I earn it? And so at that point, I decided, I'm going to grow into this belt, and I'm going to be his very best student ever. I'm going to leave a legacy behind, whether I'm with him or not, that people are going to hear my name, and they're going to know that he was one of Master Che's very best students ever. And that's still my mission, by the way. So I got uncomfortable, and as a result of getting uncomfortable and staying in that uncomfortable phase on purpose, I got good. And I got to the point where I was able to take home third places, second places, first places, and finally grand champions. And then I got uncomfortable again, and I opened my school. And boy, was that uncomfortable. I had to learn all kinds of things that I didn't have to know before, just as an instructor in my master's school. I could get away with just learning the curriculum and being nice to people and teaching. But when I opened my school, I suddenly had to learn how to be a janitor. I had to learn how to be a carpenter. Not a very good one, by the way, but enough that got me by. I had to learn how to do marketing and advertising. Back in these days, this was the early 90s, I had to go out and place flyers underneath people's windshields at local gyms and things, and walk door to door and put things into people's doors, things that you don't see very often these days because people don't like it, And I don't know if they liked it any less back then, but it was something that we did, and I was willing to do, even though I was uncomfortable doing it. And I got to the point where, the school was very successful. When I left the school in the hands of our students and instructors back in Indianapolis to move here to Florida, I was very comfortable. I mean, I had it made. We were semi-retired. I didn't have to go in unless I wanted to go in. If I wanted to take an entire month off and go to Hawaii and spend time on the beach, I could do that and not have to worry one bit about the school or the business or whether the bills were going to get paid or whether I had enough money to pay for things I wanted to do. All that stuff was set in stone, and it was really nice, but it was very comfortable. And it had been my goal to move here to Florida for about 17 years now. I think I told you in a previous podcast that I believe my wife is the first person that I tried to sell my school to so that I could move to Florida and open it down here while I was still young enough to really enjoy everything. And that didn't happen, so we ended up getting married. She loved it as much as I did. And when we moved down here, we are right back into the most uncomfortable time that I can remember in so long. This is a very uncomfortable position. I don't have the school in Indianapolis paying me, what I was getting paid before. I've got other people that are in charge of it now, and I don't call all the shots. I mean, there's certain things with our curriculum and business systems that I have input in and overall say-so on things. But as far as day-to-day operations go, I'm not there to see it. So I don't know what's happening, and I don't really, I don't have the authority to tell them certain things that they can and can't do. So it's very uncomfortable. I'm no longer in charge, and I'm a control freak. If you're a martial arts instructor, you can probably relate to that. Being a control freak kind of goes with the territory. It's very difficult to let go of the reins, which is one of the things that make me feel uncomfortable. But the other side of it is we've just basically pushed everything into this Florida location, and time's ticking, and funds are depleting very quickly. And business is growing a little slower than we had anticipated. So we're very uncomfortable again. But it's not the first time we've been uncomfortable, and so that's why I'm able to still handle the pressure that we're feeling right now, because I just know in the depths of my heart that it's going to work out, and it's going to work out better than we've ever had it before. And then instead of having one location, we're now going to have two locations that we can then increase our family and family size and increase our reach across the United States, and going from the Midwest down to the South, and then who knows where it can go from there. We even have some possible opportunities out in the California area one of these days. Who knows? We'll see where that leads. But nonetheless, it's about learning to be uncomfortable. And I want to tell you one other little thing that's going on right now, because I'm back into teaching. You see, before we moved down to Florida and opened the school, I didn't have to teach at all if I didn't want to. But I typically would teach one special class per month and a seminar usually once per month or once every other month, because I really love teaching. I really do love teaching. This is my calling, no doubt. So when I got down here, I got to the point it got to the point now, or excuse me, it is at the point where I don't have the choice anymore. I don't get to decide whether or not I want to teach today and how many times I want to teach and what I'm going to teach. I mean, of course, I can choose what I'm going to teach, but it's got to facilitate the students' learning, and more than just entertainment, it's got to develop. I've got to help them develop some skills. So I'm back in the trenches again with the students and parents and teaching, and there are a couple of students in my classes that they struggle a little bit more than other students, and I have to remember maybe they need to remember that in order for them to grow, they have to be uncomfortable. And so there are certain students that are, like for instance, I had students breaking boards last week for their testing, and there were a couple of them that were really scared about breaking the boards. And actually what I've done in our curriculum is I've removed the board breaking from the first 3 ranks, and when they go from beginner to intermediate, that's the first time they break a board in their martial arts career in our program anymore. But down here, I decided I was going to give it another test and thought I would add another layer of uncomfortableness for the students so that I could help them grow faster. Because if you want to grow faster, make yourself more uncomfortable. That's really the bottom of this whole podcast, is if you want to grow faster, make yourself more uncomfortable and do it more often. You will become better and more confident and more competent much, much faster than if you try to take it slow and easy, and the key word being there, easy. It's okay to take it slow and challenging, but if you take it slow and easy, well, in my opinion, that's the kiss of death if you really want to experience your true potential. You've got to get out there and get uncomfortable. So I have one young man that he's had some serious trouble with I don't know how to put it, being put on the spot and being asked to do something while others are watching. And so I will continually, kind of poke at him a little bit. Hey, come on, you can do this, and then he will just shut down on me. And he's had probably like 4 or 5 of these instances, and he's only been with me for about 7 weeks now, 8 weeks maybe. And he's already made tremendous improvements. And in fact, he's surprised me to no end, because I never thought he was going to last past 3 classes or so. And he brought in a little drawing, and the first side was the school logo, and on the back side of that, he said something to the effect of, I'm so glad you're my master, and thank you for pushing me to be better, and things like that. And so I put that up on our refrigerator here, our little water cooler, for all to see, because I'm very proud of that. Those are the notes that make it all worthwhile when I'm uncomfortable, because I'll tell you right now, I'm very uncomfortable with having to push this student as hard as I need to, because I know exactly what he needs from doing this hundreds and thousands of times with other kids. And I'm hopeful that his grandfather supports what I'm doing, and I think he does. And I hope even more so that the student realizes, and I make sure after the end of each class to go and talk to him personally and tell him, I'm not doing that because I don't like you. I'm doing that because I can see what you need, and if you'll trust me, I will turn you into a rock star at this school. So I'm hoping that he will support that and continue coming back and forcing himself to be uncomfortable, because he's already made several breakthroughs. And if he plays his cards right and he stays around and allows me to keep making him uncomfortable. Now, understand that I'm also going to celebrate his victories with him. So it's not going to be a one-sided affair where you're just constantly uncomfortable. What's going to happen is he's going to break through, and in this case, he's going to break through a couple of little boards, and he's going to amaze himself, and he's going to amaze his grandfather. And that's when I believe he's going to stop doubting himself as much, and he's going to, the next time I ask him to do something, he's not going to immediately go to a negative frame of mind and say, oh, I can't do it. There's no way I can't do it. And I just can't, because that's his verbiage right now with virtually anything that's challenging whatsoever in the class. And the moment he gets to one of those levels, you see a total change in him, and it's very hard to get him back on track afterwards. So I am uncomfortable because I have to stop the class and deal with this right then and there, which slows the class down sometimes. But I'm there for each and every student. And when somebody else needs me to do this in the class, I'm going to do it for them as well. And the ones who see it happening and support what I'm doing will be the ones that grow the most. And they'll be the ones, like this young man, if he continues to stay coming to class and letting me push him through out of his comfort zone, he will be one of those ones that breaks down in tears at his black belt test, and he will be so thankful that I didn't make it easy for him. And that in my opinion is what is wrong with the whole fabric of our society. You can see it in virtually every nook and cranny of our society, beginning with playgrounds and having to wear seatbelts and having to wear helmets. And I mean, these are all, again, they're all well-meaning, and it's not like they're bad ideas. Think about that for a second. Is wearing a seatbelt in your car a bad idea? No, it's not a bad idea. But you know what? Sometimes I don't really feel like wearing my seatbelt, because it restricts my movements. And I like to move a little bit more freely. If I need to lean over the other seat and grab something very quickly, I need to be able to do that. So I don't think that it's anybody's responsibility to force my safety when I'm driving. It's just my personal opinion. If I want to be stupid and drive without my seatbelt, I should have the freedom to do that and not get a ticket for it. You know what I mean? Maybe you agree with that, maybe you don't. And same with wearing helmets riding a motorcycle. It's nobody's business if I want to go out and ride a motorcycle and harm myself. Now, for the record, I don't ride motorcycles, and I probably would wear a helmet when riding a motorcycle, unless I was going down to the corner, because I want to feel the wind blowing through my hair. I want to enjoy nature, and I feel with a helmet on that might hinder some of that. So that's what I'm talking about. It's things like that. And then, of course, you go into the children's world, and every corner has been rounded, and everything has a pad on it now. And even the playground, what looks like asphalt is not asphalt. It's rubber that's painted to made to look like asphalt. So it's a facsimile, in my opinion. Now, is it a good thing to have that? Sure, it is. But realistically, the kids don't have the same fears and worries about falling off of the monkey bars and hurting themselves and learning from that pain. So I think they miss a few of the lessons that the former generation got from having those spills and wipeouts, and learning that, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or maybe wow, I did this, maybe I can take it a little further. So that's where you see kind of like the extreme games, where the extreme bike BMXing and motocross. Those guys, they kind of subscribe to the old school mentality, and that is, you're not gonna, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so these guys will try a flip on their bicycle, and sometimes they fall down and hit themselves in the head, and sometimes it doesn't turn out well at all, and they break things and whatever. But look at, if they can persist, look at what they're able to accomplish if they keep going. The superhuman feats that can be accomplished on a bicycle or a motorcycle or on a skateboard or on virtually anything today. Everything in our society has been blown up to extreme versions of everything. And so what that really means is that when things blow up to an extreme level, at some point they have to pop, kind of like the economy. At some point it has to pop, and then it has to shrink back down to size. So value of gold and silver go up and down according to that. Values of homes go up and down according to that. And it's all based on the same stuff. And so this is probably fodder for another podcast. But really what it comes down to is, if you want to be more successful in your life, you've got to learn to be willing to be uncomfortable and to put yourself in uncomfortable positions on a regular basis. And sometimes those positions are physical positions. If you're a martial artist, you're going to have to put yourself in physical positions that cause your legs and your back and your arms pain, and you're going to have to sit through the pain and get used to the pain and almost make the pain your friend and get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's how you learn how to get more flexible, and how you learn how to kick higher and faster and better, and learn how to kick harder, and you learn how to block somebody's technique coming at you without injuring your arm. I mean, you've got to go through pain. No pain, no gain. And I think it works that way in every area of our lives. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you have comments or questions about what you heard today, please feel free to put those in the comments for me. And do me a favor, if you are getting any value out of these, please like them and share them with other people so that we can impact more people. So until next time, this is James Theris saying, be uncomfortable.
That's all for this week. Tune in next week for another episode of Success Weekly. Do you have an idea you'd like James to talk about in an upcoming episode? Post your comments and be sure to share this podcast with friends.